Hello, everybody. Hey, disruptors and catalysts. Welcome to the Founders Arena podcast, where this podcast is where we help founders hurdle the challenges of early stage ventures. I am your host for this episode. My name is Mack Comandante, and today we have a very special guest. He is my friend, he is my mentor, and we've been working together for several years now. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to bring up here on stage Pedro Lopez Sela. Okay, and let me introduce him for you. He is an internationally recognized thought leader, entrepreneur, and business coach, and a keynote speaker who specializes in business strategy, in innovation, and technology and growth. And his career has been spanning over 30 years, and he has been dedicating himself to driving both organizational and individual success, coaching and training more than 10,000 leaders, not only in the US, but in different parts of the world, in Asia and in Europe. He is the managing partner of Frison Capital, where he leads this venture capital firm focusing on fostering innovation and supporting startups and scale up, especially on the health sector. He has been a founder and done executive roles as he founded and led several organizations, including Canoe, Bold Labs, and significant ventures, emphasizing entrepreneurship, innovation, and ecosystem building. He's also the author and the best-selling author of EBELI, this book, right? The Method to Madness of Venture Building, and has co-authored influential books on innovation, technology, business, and sustainability, collaborating with renowned figures, say for example with Peter Diamandis, Bob Dorff, Clayton Christensen, with Salim Ismail as well. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, up here on stage, my good friend, Pedro Lopez Sela. Hi, Pedro.
I'm so happy to be here, Mac. Thank you for having me.
Was I able to capture all of that? I was trying to compress all of it in that very short span of an introduction.
You know, it's been a while, and thing is that I think you did a really good job, better than I can do. I probably would add that for me, entrepreneurship is a tool. And this comes from the fact that I was born in Mexico. So I've been in a developing country for most of my life. And I've come to understand that entrepreneurship is a very, very powerful lever for change. I view it as probably the strongest tool that we have for social mobility. And that's why, aside from being an entrepreneur myself and angel investor and VC at different times in my life, I've also worked a lot on building platforms for other entrepreneurs. I've been blessed. I've had the support of a lot of fantastic mentors throughout my career. Thing is that I started as an entrepreneur in early 90s, which at that time, the word entrepreneur or startup in Latin America didn't even exist. So don't even think about incubators, accelerators, and all the support systems that we have today. And unfortunately for us folks in developing countries, I still see that is a big challenge. Mature ecosystems like the ones that you sometimes find in Global North are still maturing, are still growing. And for us in Southeast Asia and Africa and Latin America, it's still a big hustle. So that's what I've been focusing on, I guess, probably the last 25 years of my giving back and my half of my life, basically.
Excellent. Thank you, Pedro. Right. So I want to go directly to the meat of our conversation this morning. Right. I want to ask you, especially for our audience here in the Philippines, right? Over the past several years, we've been trying to incubate startups and allow them to access global markets as well. In your experience, can you please give us tips on deal flow and how to get the attention of VCs, not only locally, but also in the international space? So those of you who are watching this, you know that with Exoasia Innovation Hub, even with the projects that I'm working with Pedro, right now we have a list of over 3,000 investors globally, right? So the question I want to prepare our startups here in the Philippines, Pedro, to be more ready so that we could match them properly. So maybe if you could talk about, what are some of the mistakes that startups make around that context, and what would be some of the tips that you could give so that they would be able to get this VC's attention.
Okay, so a lot to be shared here. First thing first, I would say that important for an entrepreneur to understand is that there is a funnel for building a company, and depending on the level of all the stuff that creates the company is the type of support system that you need. It is not the same people, support, financial capital, resources, etc., that you need when you're at the napkin stage or when you're at an MVP prototype level or when you're finding supply chain. And this not only applies to the traditional or very renowned ecosystem of incubators, accelerators, educational programs, and so on and so forth. The same applies to private capital. So, number one, if you're trying to raise money, first of all, you need to understand if what you're building is going to become, in the long run, an SME. Now, if you're a startup, you have to do it the other way. Because if you were going to a bank as a startup business model, then there's no bank that is going to open you a line of credit or any kind of financial service for you. And that's why you have to tap into angel investing, VCs, private equities, etc. Being said that, if you're on the startup track, you have also to understand the different types of investors depending on the stage that you're at. If you have a project that you just started and nobody has invested in any money whatsoever, not even you, or probably you, but not your family and friends yet, do not go looking for third parties. An angel investor is not going to invest if you do not have at least one of the F. Same thing applies for a VC. If you do not have previous angel investing capital, it's very unlikely that a venture capital firm, which is like the beginning part of institutional investors, is going to put money into your project. Now, also take into account that there's another layer of support, meaning mentor networks, incubators, etc., that are also part of this process. Because in our case, for example, as Frison Capital, as a venture capital firm, we always prefer startups that have been through the track. Because if you were accepted and you are an alumni of an incubator or an accelerator, that is one factor that, for me, might de-risk your investment, meaning that somebody else different than you and I already gave you the chance to be part of a program in a cohort and you finished it successfully. You see where I'm going? And then finally, from those stages, the also important thing to consider is that venture capital firms and angel investors rely on their resources, their capital networks, and they also rely a lot on their experience and focus. In our case, for example, at the moment, we're very much focused on a thing that we call the investment thesis, that is kind of like the margins, the framework that allows me to play in the VC game. So all I have to do is only what's in that framework, and I cannot do anything outside of the framework. In our case, is early stage, health, Latino founders. So if you do not fulfill the 3 different check marks that we have for our business thesis, our investment thesis, it doesn't make sense that you waste your time coming to us. You're not going to be invested by us. I cannot do that because my commitment to my investors is that thesis.
So it's also important that startups then therefore have to do their due diligence and research on these different VCs. It's not like, you just send out your presentation material to everybody.
And that happens a lot. I probably get between 10 to 15 mails a day of people that are selling me different stuff. Movies, trash management. It's not in my investment thesis. So, and the other thing that is important for the entrepreneur to understand is that a venture capital firm, I don't know the numbers for the angel investors, but a venture capital firm has to review formally, in depth, about 100 companies in order to invest. In the case of developing countries, Southeast Asia, Latin America, the number goes up incredibly. In the case of Mexico, is 163. Other countries in Latin America, 150. So, and again, that's a very in-depth, thorough process. So if I get an email from a guy, because at the beginning I was trying to be nice because I'm an entrepreneur as well. So I answered every guy applying, no matter the product, no matter the geography. Now, frankly, I don't have time for that. If you didn't have time to review my LinkedIn profile, Go through the web pages. I'm a very public person. You can find anything online. Just ask Grok or Perplexity or whoever, and you're going to find info, and it's going to say Pedro, early stage health, Latin America. So if you were lazy enough not to do that search that'll take you 10 minutes, then I'm not going to answer your email. Not anymore.
Thank you, Pedro. Right, thank you for being upfront with that one. But I also want to bring your attention now to the projects that we are working on here in the Philippines, because First and Capital, as you mentioned, is focused on Latin America, on health tech and whatnot, right? But in the Philippines, we're working on several projects together, and we've been involving the entire ecosystem with our sites on Southeast Asia, right? So a couple of projects, I'm just going to mention them here. Say, for example, you want to set up, also we're opening up a fund for our VC called Southeast Asia Capital. We focus on the future of the internet, on Web3, on blockchain, right? We see a lot of potential there. Number two, you are also one of the proponents for Angel Network of the Philippines, right? And also bringing in the ecosystem of Frison Capital for that one. We're launching an AI platform, which is wAiz, which now democratizes and removes the bottlenecks of venture building. And with our AI founder, it now, in a way, standardizes and actually helps provide more meaningful guidance for any startup entrepreneur, right, globally. Okay. And our venture builder with Evodin, and with our joint venture with Fast Logistics, we just launched Rev Evodin with now more focus on an industry such as the logistics space. But we're not going to stop there, right? With our branding on Evodin, which stands for evidence-based, outcome-driven, and investable enterprise. In your vision, how does all of these projects come together, right? And how could founders leverage on that? Not only founders, even the VC ecosystem as well. What are your thoughts?
So first of all, I'm truly honored to be part of those projects. I think that they should be the silver bullet for Southeast Asia. We've been working for the last 25 years to build deep tech and knowledge economy ecosystems in the global South. And I am a true believer that actually technology is going to become the platform to new economies. And we've seen it many times. Some examples, the case of Korea, you can see how in 30 years they just, did 180 change in the country. It was crazy. And it was because they started paying attention on intellectual property and technology and deep tech and that sort of thing. The efforts that we've started the last few years for Southeast Asia from Manila, the ones that you just mentioned, I think that they are the systemic approach to make a difference. One of the complex situations that we've come to see is that building an ecosystem is always very, very difficult because you always come to the question of what comes first, the egg or the hen, right? And the problem there is that you need to balance all the parts of the ecosystem almost at the same time. And even though you have to start building the startups from the beginning, early stage, napkin idea, TRL 1, 2, and then all these ideation stuff, and then grow from there and build up, you need for those guys the support systems, and they all have to be in place from the beginning. So you need the mentors, you need the investment, you need the demo days, you need the culture, you need the corporates. And that's why I'm so happy of how fast things are going with Exoasia's ecosystem. It's fantastic that we build so much traction in such little time. And I'm pretty sure that it's going to be something not only in the benefit of Southeast Asia, but platforms like wAiz, for example, is surely going to benefit people that want to start the entrepreneurial journey but do not have access, for example, to mentor networks, which I believe it's one of the big challenges that people usually face at the beginning.
Right. So speaking of wAiz, Pedro, and speaking of EBELI as well, this book that you've authored, what makes this book so special, and how does it connect to wAiz?
So the book, I was honored by the community to appear as the author in Amazon because somebody had to go to the hustle to do the Kindle thing and all that stuff. The truth is that it was co-written by more than 7,000 people in less than 3 months. It was crazy, which stands for Evidence-Based Entrepreneurship and Lean Innovation, is a the fancy word is meta methodology. The common word is the copy paste stuff that we basically reviewed most of the business and innovation and technology books that we were able to get our hands on since the late 90s. And after reading them and trying to find the golden nuggets, we understood that the golden nuggets were not enough. We needed to funnelize it to turn it into a process that was repeatable and scalable. And that's how it was born. At the beginning, it was actually called the Business Model Toolbox, because it was a massive folder online where we just shared memos from different people that read the books and an index that made you navigate through those folders and that sort of thing. But the magic, I think, of EBELI is that after we did the first drafts of the different steps and what you have to do, somebody thought about approaching the authors of the books that we read before, which was, for me, something almost unthinkable. And in the end, we just reached out and trying to understand if they would actually even answer the email. And it turns out that they ended up becoming mentors of the process. So we ended up adding to the think tank team kind of thing people like Clayton Christensen, people like Salim Ismail, like Bob Dorff, like Jim Collins, like Bern Harnish. And those people guided us through the process. And the feedback was fantastic. Of course, many of the cases were that we actually didn't even get the book. We didn't understand it, but they were gracious enough and they were generous enough to walk us through the process and tell us how to actually implement it. And what you can see today in EBELI, you have more than 1,700 tools. It's a simplified process. Some of the people that actually helped us write the book have coined different visions of what EBELI means. One of them, which I really love, I understand it as kind of like an IKEA or Lego manual for building startups, meaning that you actually don't have to be a business expert or an innovation expert. And it actually applies to any kind of venture that you want to start. So I'm really proud of that community that built that book that we're using since probably about like 4 years ago as a book, but for about 20 years as a methodology.
So we've now digitized the book in wAiz. What makes this so special in the time and age of AI?
It's fantastic. I mean, we had this crazy dream that someday the book might become a live thing that people could start using. We talked about the clip of Word. Probably you remember the Word assistant from like 20 years ago. And that was a dream. Imagine that there's a clip within a digital platform that basically reads the book to you and tells you where you're stuck and how to jump that hurdle. And technology wasn't there yet. But now with the advancement of AI, what we've finally been able to create with the mentor that we have right now with AI is just, for me, is mind-blowing, is a dream come true.
So let's talk about that mentor. We call it Kahoo. What is the inspiration behind that? And how does it support founders, even VCs and investors as well, who goes to the platform?
So in EBELI methodology, we have a special term for the people that accompany entrepreneurs, and we call them Sherpas, based on these amazing people that help people in the Everest, do all the Himalayan process. What we've come to understand throughout the years is that, especially in developing economies, a lot of people that haven't walked the walk call themselves mentors, and it doesn't work. Because in order to be a mentor, you need two very, very critical attributes, I guess. First one, you need to have the experience, the empirical knowledge of the entrepreneurial journey so that you can share that. It doesn't matter if you read 20 books about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is kind of like swimming or basketball. You cannot buy a book on Amazon and then just start bouncing the ball. You'll never get to the NBA. So for the mentor, you need experience, full stop. Now, the other thing that we've come to see is that not all people with experience are actually good mentors. And it is not for us about the tactics or the technique of mentoring. For me, it has to do actually with empathy. If you are an empathetic person and you have the experience as an entrepreneur, very likely that you're going to be a fantastic mentor. So for that reason, we came across talking to one of my mentors, a fantastic Hawaiian guy that actually just finished a great book on being remarkable. So we talked a lot about the characteristics of a mentor and how that should happen in a startup investor ecosystem. And we started talking about these characteristics of thinking and being remarkable, right? Which is a topic, by the way, that he's been for the last, I don't know, probably 10, 15 years. And we came across, because of what he shared with us, we came across Kahu, which is a demigod in the whole culture that it basically shares wisdom with the people. And that was, the precise name that we were looking for, because for us, this super AI mentor should be a kind, empathetic entity that is able to share a lot of knowledge to people that actually need support.
Right. Thank you, Pedro. So you've talked about several things there. Number one, based on your experience and your guidance and your know-how, you've been on the road. This is not your first rodeo. You've helped hundreds of thousands of startups in the global south, right? And within that context now, we're bringing that technology here in Southeast Asia, starting off in the Philippines. And with the platform with wAiz, then any entrepreneur, any startup founder would be able to validate their ideas much faster, which is their number one goal to begin with. On the other hand, we also want to help VCs and investors because they need to have a portfolio of possible projects that they could look into. So we want to address that by democratizing and removing the bottlenecks of venture building through wAiz. And on the other hand, also de-risk the process through now with Evodine. Then now we could also help the startups to further de-risk the process, prepare them for the fundraising round. Okay, so that's excellent. And you know what, Pedro, I'm very excited when you come over to the Philippines on the week of June 9, right, on the Philippine Blockchain Week. So with that, may I ask you, what's your final message? What can people expect from Pedro as you come over, or even here online, because we're going to be continuously doing this through the Founders Arena?
I'm looking forward to Blockchain Week. I think it's going to be a massive event. I've always been fan of the community of developers in Southeast Asia. I think that you guys have some of the most talented people in the startup community worldwide. So looking forward to those conversations, definitely. And in the meantime, please do reach out. I'm very active in social media, so we can connect there and start the conversation before I land.
Is there a particular channel that you prefer?
I only use three: LinkedIn, Facebook, and X, and I use them equally. So whichever is best, reach out.
Sounds good. They just have to look for Pedro Lopez. That's unique, okay? Because in the Philippines, Pedro, we only use the last name, but you have two last names. How does that work in Mexico?
It's very confusing because so in some countries like Spain and then a second last name coming from the mother, but then also some of us have compound last names, so it gets like super complicated. In my case, always people start separating my last name. So some people call me Pedro, and it turns out that Lopez Sela is my last name, and then I have another last name, and but anyway, I try to manage.
Thank you, Pedro. Truly appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here. So if you found value in today's episode, please follow Founders Arena on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And if you are a startup founder building in blockchain, Web3, and leveraging AI, or if you are an investor looking for early access to Asia's most promising ventures, may I invite you personally to join us in the Founders Arena, where we would be gathering a curated investor and founder group during the Philippine Blockchain Week. So which is the premier convergence of innovation, of capital, and community in the region. You may find our event page at www.exoasia.org to register. We are here to connect early stage founders with strategic ventures. So once again, my name is Hande and this is Founders Arena. I'll see you.